Hello everyone, Seljan here again, and welcome back. So here comes the second part. So we know a couple things about 3ds Max. It's just the beginning of the iceberg, but on the go it will be easier to pick up, and we'll practice everything just been learned. So the hotkeys and other things. So this task is designed to get used to the interface, to know more about the basic objects, to understand the logic and when and why we switch to one to another solution, and some practical approaches. Okay, so let's start here. Now, first of all, before we will model a robot head. So an old school type of a boxy robot head with standard primitives and some basic editing. So we will do something like this. I will not pick something in particular, just go from the gut, but here's the inspiration. And once we are ready for that, we will jump in for that head. But first, let me begin with something. It needs a clarification. So whenever you start and create a 3D scene, you have to have some kind of a unit, alright? Why? Because when you use specific tools in 3ds Max, especially in other softwares as well, you have to know the amount of the value. Is it in centimeters? Is it in inches? Is it in millimeters? Will it be compatible with other softwares? Are you using the proper units? If you are working in a team, you have to share what is the convention of the units. So when you're matching your files, you want to make sure that everything falls in place. So for that reason, you have to have, and ideally you like to use units. And the other reason is about animation. When you have a model and that is distorted, that distortion can cause problems on converting, on reusing, or just saving out, exporting. So be careful and use these units properly. Let me show this and let me explain this in action. So here there is a sphere I've created in the perspective viewport. So left mouse button and right mouse button, because I don't want to create any more spheres. And let me see it in full size. So Alt W to maximize the viewport. And I can scroll in and out. And of course I want to see the segments. F4 for that. And J is turning off the bounding box. Bounding box is great, but if you see it and you are disturbed by this, especially if you are creating a box, it's not really handy. So let me show this. So you have a box and you have a bounding box, and this looks kind of ugly. So I'd like to turn this off. Let me delete. Even if I don't have it, I know I've selected this sphere. Why? Because selection color is white in 3ds Max, and this is why we are not assigning white color to a mesh. So here's the sphere, and if I'm curious about the parameters of this item, I have to switch to the modify panel and check what the parameters are. And I have about a certain 36 parameter, 36 value. I don't know what is the unit. So if there's no unit indicated, it means it's generic unit. And generic units are usually equal with 1 meter. So if you're in game, one generic unit is kind of a 1 meter. If you have 2, that's about a character height. That's going to be 2 meters. But you have to clarify this and ask for instructions if you are working in a team. Now, what happens if we are changing the radius? I'm using the spinner drag, so my left mouse button is on these little triangles, and I'm holding down the left mouse button while I'm dragging the mouse up and down, and that is called spinner drag. I can just translate this value. Okay, so as I'm changing this value, the size is changing, so there is a relation here. Now if I'm pressing R is the hotkey for scale, and I'm in a uniform scale, what does it mean? I will choose and pick the inside of the gizmo to highlight all the triangles, and this is also the selected uniform scale command. So I'm holding left mouse button down, and as I'm scaling, this value remains as it is. Even even a bit more odd that I've significantly enlarged the sphere, and when I'm going back to this radius value, I can still manipulate that value. What does it mean? Now the value is not true anymore. So be careful with this. You can use the scale, but whenever you're using the scale, this link will be a bit manipulated and altered. So technically what we have here, we have two type of sizes. One is the system unit, the system size. The system size is this one. This is what we have described in our code. But we have a display. It's kind of an inflated version of the model, and we can manipulate the display size by using the scale. The problem is that when you are attaching a animated or deformed and somewhat modified object to this one, this kind of a display scale can influence how the things will go on out. Sometimes even it could be distorted, or angles could be changed up. So please, if you want to do this, you can do what? You can do reset at the end, or you can try to avoid using the scale if it's not necessary. When editing, scale is okay, but when you are just manipulating and creating simple elements, you can try to stick to the standard radius adjustments, or any kind of height, width, and other value adjustments. Okay, now first, what to do if you have adjusted it and you want to reset it. You can do it later on, but let me start and show it here. So I'm in the utilities panel. This is a kind of a wrench, and there is a reset X form, and I can once you click it on it, it will bring up the actual button you have to press. A little bit odd, but it is there. So I'm pressing reset selected, and it will apply a modifier on top of this X form modifier above the sphere, and I can convert it down to an editable poly. And now I lost the ability to adjust it as a standard primitive because it's converted into an editable poly model, but it is reset, so I don't have to worry about any mismatch between display unit scale and system unit scale. So for when we are dealing with animation, or when we are done with the editing for an entire object, you might want to perform this reset. Okay, but to clean up things and start with a good unit and adjust system and display unit, we have to do something else. So let me press delete and remove this sphere, and here we are. So to establish a good set, we are going up to the customize and go into units setup. So we have a dedicated area just to adjust these units. And here it is. Here's the trick. So display unit scale is, right now it's using generic units. I will switch to metric. And centimeters will do fine for me because in real life this robot hand is about, 8 centimeter by 6, and so somewhat within a 10 by 10 cube. So that's cool. Metric is okay, but this is just the display. So please keep an eye on it, because this one here is not a title, it is a button, right? Another trap in 3ds Max, that this is a button. It doesn't look like a button, but it is. So I'm clicking on the system unit, and when you have a freshly installed 3ds Max and never used it and never adjusted it, there's a high chance that it will use an inch. So probably on your screen you see inches. Now avoid this conversion, so avoid using display unit scales in centimeter. The SI System International metrics, and choosing system unit scale to inches. It creates crazy conversion issues, so try to avoid this. Make sure the best rule of thumb, if you try to match system unit scale and display unit scale, to centimeters and centimeters. Alright, this way if you export, save out, import, whatever your file, it will be a little bit easier on the go, and you can easily recognize that what is the unit that you're working with. Okay, so press OK, and here press OK again, and now something instantly updated. If you look at the bottom of our coordinates, so XYZ shows the locate of the selected object or the cursor. So in my case, it's just a cursor because there's nothing created. But we already see the units indicated and assigned. So we have centimeters. Alright, now let me create a box. So here we go. Let me check my references. I will start with a box, and I will try to apply a taper to the box. So I want to make a bit more like a kind of a vacuum formed content. So I'm in a perspective and create a box. Somewhat guessing, so I don't know exactly where it will be. I just start from here, and I don't know the size either, so it may be wrong, too big. But at this stage, I have created the foundation, elevated, and right-click and exit, and I have the box, and I will modify it later on the modify panel to check the values. Now, if you have struggles to creating the box, please keep in mind that usually Max is working by dragging out the base values. So holding down left mouse button, and I'm holding and drag my mouse. And when I'm releasing, it will be another input. This input is, okay, this is the end corner of the foundation. Now I'm switching to the next step of creating a box. That will be the elevation. That will be the height of the box. And when I'm satisfied, I'm clicking again left mouse button. But this one's just one click. I'm not holding down anymore. Rotating around, and okay, if it's fine and you don't want to create any more boxes, you can press a right click again to exit the command. Okay, now this is just a guesswork. So if I want to be a little bit more accurate, I have to switch to the modify panel and read the values I've seen here. So the length value, I don't know which one is length, which one is width, which one is height. So if you are confused, I can absolutely know what you feel. These are depending on which one was the original view that you've created your box in. So what does it mean? If your length value here changes this measurement, it might be different if you created it instead of front view or left view. So always, my best advice is always check these values. Just drag them, use the spin and drag, and hey, now you can recognize where we are. So height is actually height is okay. Length is a little bit off. Now, how do I know which one is the front, which one is the back of the model? So if you're getting confused, you can always press Alt W and go back and look for left side and front view and top view. So here, this is the front side. You can even check this. If it tells you the front, it helps you to understand this is the front direction, okay? So even if you are not using this viewport key because you're using the hotkeys, it can give you an information about, okay, which direction is which. So this is front, this should be back, this is the right side, this is the left side. So in the left view, you will see this side of the cube. Okay, now let me correct the values. So length, I want to make it 10, just to make it fairly small. This one will be about 20. Okay, and of course height is matching. It must be about 10. Oh no, well, 15. Alright, it's good. Probably the width is too low, so let me change it to 15. Alright, so these are the dimensions. A little bit bigger than originally thought, but it's good and proportionate stuff. Alright, now what else? If we want to mirror things, if we want to edit things that could be mirrored, and we want to save some time and we want to make it symmetrical, we have to, or we should, to place this object right in the origin. So to do that, you can just try to do it manually, so you can check the top viewport. I'm switching with the middle mouse button, so middle mouse button is clicked, and that is activating the windows. I'm dragging this, and I'm dragging the axis, okay? So I'm not just randomly selecting and trying, I'm dragging the axis. If I want to accurately move, I'm dragging the axis, and I'm trying to make it possible that the center point is meeting with the origin. That is the thicker line in a viewport. So origin, the 0, the meeting point of all axes is the center is usually highlighted with a thickened blacker line. Now, I'm pretty good, but still not good enough. So what you see here, these values, I'm in move mode. So because I'm in move mode, these values are giving me a position and location in length values. If I'm switching to rotation mode, just as an example to understand how these are working, if I'm switching to rotation, this one is degrees. Okay, so it is content aware. If you're switching to a tool, usually many of the windows are updating to that tool. Okay, I'm switching back W to move, and make sure that this is low enough. So I want to see a 0 here, or oddly enough, you might see -0. That's also happening time to time. So let me try to, oh no, it's pretty hard. I can't do it. I can go in here and type 0 and hit enter. That's one way, but it is still slow. If I want to make it faster, I enter the first value, then press the tab button and press 0 again and enter or use tab. I can cycle through values. Same thing here. If you want to make it faster, you can cycle through these values. How cool is that? But if you want to make it even faster, let me undo this. If you want to make it even faster, you don't even have to go in and type in the values. If you know that you want to use a 0 value because you want that center, it's very handy in animation. If you want to reset something to the original place to 0, you can press a right click on this. Okay, right click there, and hey, everything falls in place. We are now dead center. Everything is at 0. So right now this hand is absolutely at the 0. Alright, let me activate the perspective. Middle mouse clicking in and Alt W. And here it is, front view. This is the facing view. And now I want to create a taper. Now, why? Because the head part should be a little bit smaller, so tapering a little bit in the upwards, the Z direction. And as you see, we have a world coordinate here, and we have this elements coordinates as well, especially when you're choosing this select move. This one will be indicated. If you rotate this item around, there's a chance these two might not match, but this one will always give you an input on the world coordinates. Other softwares are using Z as instead of Z, they're switching up it with Y. So Y is pointing upwards. In 3ds Max, this is the upward direction, so Z is the upward direction. Probably it's because of kind of an engineering similarity where you have a kind of a floor plan and then you are extruding up things. So this logic indicates that that Z is pointing upwards. Now going back how to use the taper, we can access to the modifier taper. To do this, one way, I will show the different ways. So one way is to go up to the modifiers and choose from the text that, okay, what type of modifier is it? It's a parametric deformer because I can add value how much taper I want. I want 10 amount of taper. So walking down, here we go. We have plenty of different modifiers. So let me hit on taper, and by default, it gives me an amount of 1. So I don't like the direction, so probably I will switch and choose and pick a negative value. So minus 0.2. Okay, in my keyboard layout, it is a comma, but it's depending on your location and settings. It may be a point. Okay, so I will use the comma, but it may be a point. So please test it out for yourself. And because we want to make it smaller, we are changing to minus instead of a positive. Positive value will increase. Okay, now we have plenty of features here. I don't want to walk through every feature because it's kind of a lifetime. But you don't have to walk on YouTube to spend days looking for the features, because if we press F1, I've already looked up for these. So if you press F1, depending on the software version you're running, it will open up the online help, and you will be able to look for the content. And here are these modifiers, object space modifiers, and within object space you're walking down, and there is at the end of this row there's a taper modifier, and here we go. This is the taper modifier. You can even add kind of shapes to this modifier if you wish. Right now we are not interested in that, but here all of the various settings are explained and shown with examples. All right, it's come on, there's nothing easier than this to look up for the actual help of the software. Okay, let me go back, and I'm pretty happy with this. Let me rename the head to head, and this will be head. And I want to create a nice effect. I want to create some kind of a reinforced edge around this head, like a kind of a protector type of edge. So add some volume to these edges. There is a modifier called Lattice, and this lattice can create a nice touch to it. Now, how to do this? I can use the shift copy, but shift copy it's not really good. Why? Because it will displace my model. I want to create it right at the location, so I will select and delete this one, and instead of the shift and drag, I will use the command we've seen in the previous lesson, and that is Ctrl and V, simple V, and something strange will happen now. The difference between instance and reference is instance is a kind of a cloning option, so it means every model that you've copied with the instance function will follow what to do. So no matter what you pick in a row, it will be exactly the same for everything else, and the changes will be updated. Reference is a one-way direction. It's a one-way communication. So if you change the parent object, so the original object, the child, the spawn will follow what you update. But if you apply a further modifier to the child, it won't take effect on the parent. So there's some kind of an independence from the parent regarding to additional changes. So it will be renamed to head and edge. And now we have two models. We have head at its place, and we have head edge sharing the same location. Now, if you remember, instance will only highlight the letters and print them in bold. But what happens here, it's on top of it, so it's just not this one is the only change. On top of it, you will see this kind of an emphasized line above the names and taper in the hierarchy. So here's the original. This one is highlighted because it shows there is a dependency. So this is kind of a parent. This is a kind of a child, and we can add a further modifier from the drop-down list. Now, hey, look at my hand. So what I do is, instead of choosing from the modifier drop-down list, now I will choose another option. From this modifier list, I will choose Lattice. So L, Lattice, will bring me straight to the solution. So Lattice will be applied. And what's happening? We have an original box, but we have the head edge with a new modifier on top. Let me shrink down the values. So 2 centimeter is way too big. I want to play 0.25 as a radius. Okay, this is a radius. So the diameter, the overall diameter of it will be 0.5. And the number of segments, because I want to make it rounded, it will be a little bit more, sorry, the sides. So 5, 6, 7, 9 is fair enough. And if I turn on smooth and F4, I'm turning off F4. Why? Because I want to check if it's really smooth or not. If I don't use the smooth function and I don't turn on and off the F4, the show wireframe on top function, I can't really judge that if it's smooth out or not. Okay, so this is why I'm using this F4 function. So time to time, I like to turn off this the wires to check how the surface is actually behaving. Okay, we still have these kind of a strange joints here. If we don't need those, we can turn on struts only from edges. So this way we can get rid of the joints. Or we can just stick to the joints. It's up to you. Or we can keep both and adjust the joints diameter. So we can just crank it up. We can add more segments to make it more rounded. Actually, I like it this way, smoothen out. All right, it's funny. So this is what we have. Now, why do we want it to create a reference? If it's still not clear, and you still not get why we have this kind of a odd thing, let me select all, and let me just select the lattice and move it away for a second. So if I have this original model, I have this taper value. I'm going to modify panel, and the taper modifier is ready to be adjusted. I can change the amount value. And this is what happens. If I change the original, this one will follow because there is a relation. But because the relation is a one-way relation, if I apply a lattice, if I apply a further modifier, it will not affect backwards. It will not affect the parent. Okay, so what I make change on the parent will affect and will appear on the child. But what I do with the child, what I do with the spawn, it will stay there. So I can make further changes, tests, modifications. Alright, now let me undo and go back to this point where we have everything in place. And just to be a little bit easier and practical, I will change the color of it. So the lattice will be a little bit brighter blue. Okay? So we have the head, we have the lattice. Now, what's next? I will go and I will try to create an eye for this robot. This will be a cylinder. So it will be kind of a simple rounded eye. Let me go in here like this. Okay, so I'm going to create a cylindrical eye, but because it looks like the best option to create a rim, I will choose not the cylinder, I will choose something else called tube. Now let me go back and how to do it. So the default way to create this is, I don't say it's default, but the easiest way is to go back to the 4 viewports, so Alt W, go back to the 4 viewports. We have a front view, and we want an eye here. So let me go to the Create panel, and I want to create something new. This will be a tube. So I'm going in, press down, I'm starting from the middle, pulling it out. This is one outer edge. The releasing left mouse button. I'm still in creation, so it's not complete. This will be the inside edge now. I'm clicking again, and now I'm ready to add the height. Okay, so can you see what's going on in top viewport? If you are creating something and you don't know or you just practicing yet, it's always a good idea to go back quickly to the 4 viewports, check what's going on live, and then you can go back to the perspective and fix and move and transform the item. Okay, so let me click on. I'm satisfied with the length. I don't want to create a too protruded element. And as you see, even if it's not visible visually, the mesh, because of the selection highlight, I see that it is inside the head. So why is it possible? Because I was creating it in the front viewport, and the front viewport will automatically use this wall, this grid, as its active grid. So the perspective uses the floor as its active grid. The front view uses the behind the wall as an active grid. The top view uses again the floor, just like the perspective. And the left view uses the side wall. Okay? So if I'm creating this here, it could be an ear. Alright, we will do that, but right now we are creating this eye around rim. But if we are creating an ear, we will do it in the left view. Okay, now let me go back to perspective. And be careful, item is selected. Let me rename it to head, eye, rim, and R. Now it looks a little bit odd to give so much names and iterations to this, but let me explain. So we have head. We have head edge. That means in hierarchy, this is the biggest. Head edge is, yeah, it's important. It is a part of the head. And because eye is also part of the head, but eye, we are creating a part for an eye. So we will have eye lens. We will have eye rim left. And we will have eye lens right and left. So it's easier to recognize where we are. It's kind of a typical naming convention. You don't want to go crazy and use as short names as possible, but naming this way early on can help you a lot. Because if you copy 1,000 of a chair or forest or creating trees or any kind of a foliage, it can be a struggle once you create it to rename them. You can do it, but it will require more time. So name these things properly early on. Okay, let me go back to Alt-W, maximize viewport, and carefully selecting the x-axis and pull it out from the head. Pull it out until I reach the surface. And now, hey, here it is. So we have this rim of an eye. Now, it's pretty cool, pretty cool. I'm not satisfied 100%. Why? Because of the angle. So if I want to correct my angle, I can go to left view by pressing L, as in the left view, and I know already how to switch to rotation mode, so I will switch to E, rotation, and carefully selecting this, the yellow highlighted angle, axis, to tilt. And I'm just eyeballing this, okay? Go back to perspective, check how it looks, and okay, I'm pretty satisfied. Maybe I will pull it inside. Okay, F4 is activated, so F4 is activated, and here's a little trick. This trick is nothing else, but when you want to work a symmetrical model and you have a box, naturally you don't have any dividing edge. But if you are going back in hierarchy, so right now I see only the adjustments of the taper because I'm on a hierarchy level of the taper. How do I know? Because it's highlighted in blue. If I'm clicking on the box, now the box is highlighted, it's great. So I have access to all the values. It's a non-destructive wave modeling, so we have a hierarchy, but we can always go back to the origins. And I want to add segments. Uh-oh, something happened. If I add segments, the lattice will update. So my goal was to create a dividing edge that's running across to help me to make decisions on the symmetry and easier placement. But right now, because we have a connection between the lattice and the box head, it causes me a headache. Now what to do? Let me go back and reset these to 1. And let me break the dependency. So to do that, I will select the lattice. And let me go back to the level taper. And when I'm at the level taper, because this is where the hierarchy, this is where the relation stops. So lattice is not related to the original head model, but taper is taken from the parent. to remove this connection, we can go and click on Make Unique. And when you click Make Unique, but be careful, because before you click Make Unique, make sure that you are selecting the head edge model. Okay, now I can select the head model and go. As you see, there's no highlights anymore, so it's not bold. The letters is not written in bold. And when you adjust the segment numbers now, it's not updating. So the segments will only appear on the head. Again, if you don't see the segments, don't forget F4, function key 4 is required to do that. Okay, now, oh, it's quite nice. What to do? What else we can do? Maybe there is another way to fit an item on an angled surface. We have Autogrid function. So let me show this. It's not sure that you want or you have to use it, but let me show, because it's a very, very important feature if you want to place something on a surface already instead of creating it on the front, on the left, or whatever side. Because we have this foundational box, we can use this. So I will create something similar as an eye directly on the surface instead of the front view. So it was a tube, and what we have to do is, before we are creating the tube, we are turning on Autogrid. And Autogrid will turn our cursor into an interactive surface checker. So if I'm on this surface, it will recognize the surface orientation and angles. If I'm on top, it will adjust the location to there. If I'm going to the side, to there. So we'll start from the center, drag it out, outer edge, inside edge, height, and click and done. Alright, so it's quite fast. The only problem is it's not 100% accurate all the time. Right now, it's really close. I think it's almost perfect, but you have to check this. Okay, it's not enough if you just create it and check this. There's a difference between the two in the thickness, but the segment number is the same. So we will take care of that later on. But I'm satisfied with this right now. I will delete it anyway, because I will complete this eye first, and then we'll make a mirrored model of it. Alright, I just wanted to show you that Autogrid is in. Now, one thing that you should know, and you might want to keep in mind, if you don't have this Autogrid on, and you are creating something on the face, this is what happens. So if Autogrid is not turned on and you want to create an eye and the tube, Autogrid turned off, and you want to create it here, it will create on the floor. Why? Because in perspective the floor is active, and it will create it behind the model because you're in perspective. So actually, if you're not careful, you can create, for example, let me select a teapot, and I want to place the teapot on top of the head, or close to the top of the head, so I'll start here, but this is what happens. This teapot is in the distance, and it's 10 times larger than a usual teapot. Okay, why? Because in perspective, I've created something, and I was not aware that the cursor point is really far in the distance. So even if I don't see the grid 1,000 miles away, it is still pretty far. So if I'm creating anything in that point, it will be fairly big and quite in the distance, right? So this is why I like, if you want to do something on the floor, you have to look above from the bird's eye view and do your thing here, or you have to create it from the top view. Okay, so I'm always using the middle mouse button to activate things, and if I'm pressing down furthermore, I can just instantly rotate. Now, by the way, if you haven't already noticed, you can rotate views. So if you're walking around and try to navigate the viewport, there's a chance you rotated accidentally your viewport. This is what happens. So I'm able to hold down the Alt key and rotate my viewport, and what happens, it switches to an orthographic view. Now, top and left is also an orthographic view, a projected view, and this is the isometry, and the main difference between the perspective is visually, even if you see it's shaded, the grid. So whenever you see this high density grid, and there's no shrinkage of the model, so everything is parallel, everything is just running in 90 degrees, it means that you are in an orthographic mode, and it's not really suitable to work. It's good for checking, but it is not a perspective, so it will give you a false illusion of perspectivity, especially if you don't see the grid. You can turn off the grid by pressing G. It's a new hotkey, rarely used. Sometimes it's useful, but if you have a chance, don't turn it off, as you are just learning the basics. So how to fix this? I'm going to go back to the front view, so I'm just pressing the F button. So whenever you see you rotated it around and you read orthographic view, hey, it's a no-no. So you can work top, front, left, and perspective. So mostly 90%. There's no reason to work in orthographic unless you are doing something specific. And how to fix this? T for top view. And there we go. If I'm in front and see the shaded model, I want to see my wires instead. I'm just pressing F4 and F3. F3 is for strictly wireframes. Alright, now let me go back up here and let me create the lens of the eye. Now, how to create the lens? There's an object called oil tank. Now, oil tank is kind of a funny object, so let me turn on Autogrid because I want to work directly in here and drag it out. It's like a cylinder, but it's like it's kind of a cylinder, capsule, kind of a medicine type of look. So it's it will give you this type of shape. So let me select, extrude, clicking again, adding the edges, and right click. Here we are. So if you have issues to create this, you can turn off the Autogrid and test it out. So let me go back again, oil tank, turn off Autogrid, and I will create again bird's eye view from the top, almost the top, but I'm still in perspective. Oil tank, drag it out. This is the foundation. Leaving the left mouse button, lifting it up. That's the height. Clicking again, but I'm still not ready because there's a chamfer option. Even if I don't see this kind of a chamfer and top curvature adjustment, I can just move away my mouse until it starts creating something, left to right, for example, and then clicking again. And you don't have to worry about size or anything, because once you have it created, you can still go to the modify panel and change the values. Okay, so you have access to all the values, all the blending, all the sides, all the segments, etc. So let me delete this. Let me go back to my original one. And naming convention, so I have to rename it somehow. Let me borrow the name. So select head eye rim, or highlighted, Ctrl C, copied, select the other item, Ctrl V, and it's not a rim, it's lens. And push it in, and maybe I need to pull it up. So it's just a practice to move these things around. Radius is okay, probably should be a little bit smaller. Height is okay. I like this protruding thing. And blend, I'm not worried about blending now because the outer edges are not visible, so I don't want to do that. But smoothing out by adjusting the number of sides can help. Okay, so this is what I do. Okay, now we have the eye socket and the lens, but we can still add some details to the eye sockets. Now, how to do it? First, let me adjust this. Why? Because we are using way too many segments, and honestly, it's not that super nice. Now, here's another function that's fairly useful if you're working on a specific detail and you want to keep your attention on that detail the most. I'm using the Control key to select the head-eye rim and the head-eye lens. And now I see the highlight here, and I'm pressing Alt-Q. Alt-Q is the isolation. So I'm Alt-Q isolating these two, and if I'm not satisfied, I can always go back with this button. This is the exit isolation or enter isolation. Alt-Q is entering an isolation, but you can use the button as well. Alright. If you want to only focus on the rim, you can select just the rim and press Alt-Q again, and it will isolate that single object. But let me select the two, press Alt-Q and isolate, and select this edge. And my big question is how to make it smoother and how to save polygon count, because honestly I don't need that much polygon around the segments. So to remove those, I can just reduce the number of segments. And I know that I need to lower this value, so I'm dragging it, moving it, and drag it down to 1. And now I don't have any segments. It's cool. It's good. What else? The number of the sides all around is about 18. This one's fine, but if we're zooming in and we want to create a render of this robot head, it will be a little bit jaggy, so the silhouette is not that nice and smooth. So to avoid that, I will increase this to 55. Still not that good, so maybe 40. Okay, that 40 looks really good. I can pull this out a little bit more, so make sure that these are intersecting and we have some kind of a edge running around. Why? Because my main goal is to modify this a little bit further. But what happens? Left isolation mode. So how can I modify this further? I have to convert it into an editable poly. So instead of using modifiers, I will use editable poly. And to do that, I can apply a modifier. That's one option. Or I can convert this item into an editable poly. Now to convert it, you can press a right click on the name and convert to editable poly here, or in the viewport, item selected, right click and convert to editable poly. It will do the same thing. Okay, or if you don't like it, you can also go to polygon, select this in the modeling in the ribbon, and that will apply an edit poly modifier to you. So this way, if you make a change here and you're not satisfied, you can delete the modifier itself, and you're not destroying your original tube. Because we will not use the ribbon right now, I will select the whole thing and just convert it into editable poly, and we don't have to worry about the tube anymore. It is a simple editable poly. And our main goal is to select these edges running around and chamfer them. Okay, so this is what we will not go crazy. We will just do a simple chamfer. So edit poly, we have items called subobjects. Later on I will explain in details, but right now just please follow it. So edges, and I'm selecting a single edge just by clicking. By default, the highlighted mesh is shown in white and the selected one is shown in red. It's just a single edge, so if I make a chamfer, that chamfer will only appear here. So if I want to select everything in a loop, I will go down here and choose a loop. And now everything that's next in a row will be selected. So to do a chamfer, I will go and use the easiest way. That's a right click method. So selection is running, right click, and I will go, and instead of a simple chamfer, because I'm looking for adjustments, I will choose the window version of chamfer. So window means chamfer with settings. So I'm clicking on this tiny button. Don't forget, look up. If you're just watching your screen, look at the video. That's a little tiny button, chamfer with settings, and it will bring me a dialog. Now, this is important to see this centimeter value, because we were so clever that we modified the units right before we started. It recognized that our main unit is 1 centimeter, and it's not starting about 100 meters or 10 inches. It is recognizing that we are working in a unit scale now. So let me decrease it, and let me increase the number of segments, so it will be softer. Now here comes something, I don't know. It is a round, so it is a radius now. So if you want to create a radius, you have to use chamfer and increase the number of segments. And a simple straight cut chamfer like this, a 45-degree chamfer, will become a fillet. Okay, so I will do this on this edge, but I want to do the same thing on the inside edge. Now the trick is, you don't have to leave your selection. If you click it away, the selection disappears, but this window is still active. So let me click on it, the edge again, go here again, loop, and voila. Now the chamfer is still active, so the preview is there again. If I want to add to my selection, what I can do is holding the control, that's the add function, clicking on another edge inside, and click again loop. And now everything is selected. And if I'm satisfied with the values, the amount, so I have to be careful or do it by 0.4 manually. It's too much, 0.3. Okay. So if I'm happy, I can accept it by the check. And here we go. We have a nice rounded rim. Okay, now how to mirror this? We have the lens selected, we have the rim selected, and I'm going to the front view and showing the shaded mode. So F3 is the wireframe and shaded mode switch. I'm in front view, and my goal is to mirror this part to the other side. And the way I do it, I'm going to use the mirror command. 2 items are selected, and this is why you see here 2 objects selected, 2 objects selected. So you don't see the modifier list details here. Why? Because we have 2 independent elements. So it cannot show the modifiers, it cannot show the editable poly, because these are actually not related to each other. These are just selected together. So what's next? Go up here to use the mirror, move it away a little bit, and the mirror axis is x-axis. So this is the horizontal axis. The world horizontal axis is axis here. All right, so I'm okay with that. I want to make a clone. Actually, I want to make an instance. So I want to make sure if I change something up in here, that will be followed, strictly followed on the other side, and vice versa. As you see, the moment I've selected instance, something weird happens with the wires, and it is a hint that we have overlapping elements. Why we have overlapping? Because there is no offset yet. So if I start creating the offset, and right now I'm just eyeballing things, I can move it away. Alright, later on we will discuss how to create its accurate values and how to change this a little bit better. But right now it's good if we are just eyeballing the things. Let me press OK, and here we go. If I have this lens here, let me rename it to lens left and rim left, because hey, accuracy is half part of the work. So make it tidy is very important if you are working in a team project. Alright, so if I want to change something, like, let me select the oil tank, the lens. So if the height is too much or too small, I can add more. Cap height. If I'm increasing the cap height, it will be a little bit more rounder. Alright, it's a little bit more friendly. Much more curious robot head. Alright, so we have created some basics. We used instances. Now you know the reference, the big difference between reference and instance. You have recognized that we have various grids, and we can break a relation between an instanced or referenced model. We also barely but used editable poly as a function, and we added a chamfer, and actually a segmented chamfer that will become a fillet at the end to the eye rims. So that was the first part of the robot, and we will move on with other very useful tools. So thank you and see you next time. Goodbye.